You won't believe what a simple accusation can do to a person's life. Imagine working in the same house for years, being treated almost like family, and suddenly seeing everything fall apart because of a broken vase. What I'm going to tell you today is a story that will stir your emotions and make you question everything you think you know about trust, prejudice, and justice. It was a typical Tuesday when Claudia arrived for another day of work. For 8 years, she had cared for that house as if it were her own. She knew every corner, every object, every stain on the floor that needed special attention. Her employer, Mrs. Helena, was always polite and respectful, and Claudia felt she had built something more than just a working relationship there. The house was imposing, the kind you see from afar and wonder, who lives there? 3 stories, a well-kept garden, a crystal-clear pool, and a decor that exuded elegance from every angle. But the most striking feature in the main living room was a crystal bookcase that took up almost an entire wall. It held the family's most precious possessions, imported artifacts, antique porcelain, and goblets that sparkled like diamonds when the morning sun hit the window. Claudia always took special care of that bookshelf. She knew each piece there had its own story, its own value, its own significance. Donna Helena had often told her how those objects had come down through generations of the family. Some brought back from travels around the world, others inherited from grandparents and great-grandparents who were no longer with us. In the center of the shelf, in a prominent position that no one could miss, stood a Persian vase that was the crown jewel of the entire collection. It was an absolutely unique piece, an ancient work of art crafted by Persian artisans over 1,000 years ago. The details were so delicate and intricate that they seemed to have been painted by angels. Every curve, every design, every golden stroke told an ancient story of Persia that very few people in the world had the privilege of beholding. Donna Helena always said that vase was priceless, but in reality it was worth $1 million. It was one of the most valuable Persian archaeological pieces in private hands in the entire world. It had been appraised by international experts and insured for an astronomical sum. It wasn't just a beautiful object. It was a living piece of human history, a treasure few museums in the world possessed. The origin of that piece was fascinating. Donna Helena had inherited it from her late husband, a passionate collector of Persian art. He had acquired the vase from an auctioneer specializing in Middle Eastern antiquities, in a transaction that involved years of negotiation and documentation to prove the authenticity and legality of the acquisition. The vase had belonged to a noble Persian family for centuries before reaching the hands of European collectors. Claudia perfectly understood the importance of that object. Even though she was only the caretaker of the house, she had also developed a special connection with that space. She knew exactly how Donna Helena liked the cushions arranged on the sofa, knew the ideal water temperature for each of the plants, and most importantly, she knew how much that treasured shelf meant to her mistress. So every time she cleaned there, Claudia made a point of being even more careful than usual. She removed each piece with extreme delicacy, cleaned it one by one with special cloths that Donna Helena had bought specifically for this purpose, and then put everything back exactly where it belonged. It was an almost sacred ritual, performed with the precision of someone who knew she was handling priceless treasures. The Persian vase in particular received extra care. Claudia never moved it. She simply ran a soft bristled brush around the base and used a special anti-static cloth to remove any dust that might accumulate on its surface. She knew the piece was worth more than she would earn in several lifetimes of work, and she treated it with the respect such a precious object deserved. That Tuesday, Claudia arrived a little earlier than usual. Donna Helena had gone away for the weekend to visit her daughter in another city and wouldn't be back until late afternoon. The house was silent, with only the sound of birds in the garden and the soft purring of Napoleon, the family's Persian cat, who usually lounged lazily on the living room sofas. Napoleon was a peculiar cat, as elegant as the house he lived in, but with a personality that blended the typical Persian haughtiness with a sometimes inconvenient curiosity. It was common to see him walking around the highest furniture in the house, exploring every nook and cranny as if he owned it all. Donna Helena always said he was more sophisticated than many people she knew, and that his Persian lineage perfectly matched the antiques in the collection. Claudia began her usual routine: kitchen, bathrooms, bedrooms, and finally the main living room with its precious bookshelf of treasures. It was always the last thing she did, because it required the most time and concentration. As she worked, Napoleon watched her from afar, with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to judge her every move. Everything was going smoothly when Claudia decided to take a lunch break. She made a simple sandwich in the kitchen and sat on the back porch, enjoying the pleasant midday sun. From there, she could see part of the living room through the glass doors and noticed that Napoleon had climbed onto the sideboard next to the antique bookcase. It wasn't unusual. The cat always liked high places, and that sideboard was one of his favorite spots to watch the street scene through the window. Claudia continued eating her lunch peacefully, unaware that her life was about to change completely. When she returned to finish cleaning, what Claudia saw chilled her. On the living room floor, scattered in 1,000 pieces, were the remains of the ancient Persian vase worth $1 million. The most precious object in the entire collection, a unique piece in the world, lay shattered on the marble floor as if it were just another object. Claudia's heart raced. Her legs grew weak. Her hands began to tremble. She approached the wreckage like someone approaching a crime scene, in disbelief. How could this have happened? She had been so careful, as always. She hadn't even gotten close to the bookshelf yet. The fragments scattered across the floor told the story of an immeasurable tragedy. Pieces of ancient pottery with intricate Persian designs, gold details that gleamed even when shattered, all jumbled together in a jumble of shards that represented the destruction of $1 million and centuries of history. Napoleon was sitting on the sofa, licking his paws with the calmness typical of cats, as if nothing had happened. Claudia looked at him, then at the shards on the floor, trying to understand how this situation had unfolded. But at that moment, the only thing she could think about was Donna Helena's reaction when she discovered that a unique piece, valued at $1 million, had been destroyed. She knew she couldn't simply sweep up the shards and pretend nothing had happened. The vase's absence would be noticed immediately. It was impossible to hide the destruction of such a valuable and meaningful piece. So with her hands still shaking and her heart racing, Claudia picked up the phone and called Donna Helena, who was at her daughter's house. The conversation was brief and tense. Claudia explained that a terrible accident had occurred and that the Persian vase was broken. On the other end of the line, the silence was deafening. When Donna Helena finally spoke, her voice was different, cold, distant, filled with disbelief that quickly turned to horror. "The Persian vase?" she asked, as if she couldn't process the information. "Claudia, are you talking about the $1 million vase, the only one in the world?" "Yes, Mrs. Helena. I'm so sorry. I don't know how it happened." On the other end of the line, Claudia could hear what sounded like a groan of pain, as if Donna Helena had been punched in the stomach. Then, a silence that seemed to last an eternity. "I'll be right back," Donna Helena said finally, her voice carrying a coldness Claudia had never heard before. "Don't touch anything. Don't disturb any of it. I want to see exactly how it is when I get there." The hours that followed were the longest of Claudia's life. She carefully tried to pick up the pieces, as if there were any hope of fixing the unfixable. Each fragment she gathered seemed to represent not only the lost monetary value, but also her own professional life crumbling. 8 years of work, trust, and mutual respect, all of it could crumble because of that accident. As she waited, Claudia considered the impact. $1 million was an amount she could never repay, even if she worked for the rest of her life. It was the equivalent of decades of her salary, and more than the financial value, it was the loss of a unique historical piece, something that could not be replaced by any amount of money. When Donna Helena arrived home, her face was more serious than Claudia had ever seen it. She looked at the shards carefully arranged on a tablecloth on the kitchen table, then looked at Claudia with an expression that mixed devastation, anger, and something that seemed like deep suspicion. The conversation that followed was devastating. Donna Helena wanted to know exactly how it had happened. Claudia explained that she didn't know, that she had gone out to lunch and returned to find the vase broken. But her explanation sounded vague and incomplete, and she could see in her employer's eyes that she wasn't being believed. It was then that the questions became more direct, more accusatory. How could a vase that was securely in the center of the shelf simply fall over on its own? How could such a valuable and well-positioned piece be destroyed without human intervention? Why hadn't Claudia heard the sound of the break? Wasn't she trying to hide something? The situation got even worse when Donna Helena mentioned the exact value of the piece. "Claudia, do you realize that this vase was worth $1 million? $1 million! It's a unique piece in the world, ancient and can never be replaced. That's more money than you would earn working for 100 years. Each question was like a knife in Claudia's chest. She tried to explain, to swear she hadn't touched the vase, that she'd been careful as always. But the more she spoke, the more she seemed to be getting tangled up in her own words. The situation was spiraling out of control, and she could feel 8 years of trust being shattered as completely as that ancient Persian vase. The accusation wasn't made directly at that first moment, but it was implicit in every word, every look, every prolonged silence. Claudia knew she was being considered guilty until proven innocent. And how could she prove her innocence when she didn't even understand what had happened? How could she explain the destruction of $1 million piece without sounding like someone trying to escape responsibility? The days that followed were a nightmare for Claudia. News of the broken vase spread through the neighborhood with astonishing speed, but this time with even greater weight. It wasn't just an expensive object that had been destroyed. It was a unique piece in the world, valued at $1 million, that could never be replaced. Within hours, it seemed everyone knew that Donna Helena's maid had broken the most valuable Persian vase in the collection. And of course, as always happens in these situations, the details were distorted with every conversation, every whisper, every judgmental glance. Some spoke of 2 million, others of a precious heirloom from Persian emperors. The value grew in the mouths of the people, but the essence remained. A financial and historical tragedy had occurred. Claudia lived in a neighborhood where everyone had known each other for years. It was a small community, the kind where people greet each other on the street and know each other's business. Over the course of 8 years, she had built a solid reputation there. She was known as an honest, hard-working, and responsible person. Her neighbors always praised her, saying Donna Helena was lucky to have found someone so trustworthy to care for a house with so many valuable possessions. But now, as Claudia walked down the street, she felt the different looks. Some were filled with pity, others with morbid curiosity, and the worst were those filled with silent judgment. She could almost hear people's thoughts. How could someone be so careless with $1 million piece? 8 years working in the same house and now this. Was it truly careless or malicious? The psychological pressure was unbearable. Claudia would wake up in the early hours of the morning with her heart racing, remembering the shards scattered across the floor and their astronomical value. During the day, she tried to concentrate on her other activities, but her mind always returned to that fateful Tuesday. And at night, when she finally managed to fall asleep, she dreamed of Persian artifacts shattering in a seemingly endless dance of macabre magic. The magnitude of the damage made everything even more serious. It wasn't just a broken treasured object, it was $1 million literally shattered on the floor. It was an ancient historical piece, unique in the world, that had survived wars, invasions, centuries of history, only to be destroyed on a random Tuesday in a random house. Donna Helena had decided to give Claudia a few days to think things over about what had really happened. This forced break from work was interpreted by everyone as a clear sign of suspicion. After all, if it really was an accident, why wouldn't the boss allow her employee to continue working normally? Why take someone off work for a whole week if there were no serious suspicions? During this period, Claudia learned from neighbors that Donna Helena was talking to others about the case. Apparently, she had consulted not only a lawyer, but also insurance specialists and antiques experts to assess the legal and financial situation. There was talk of criminal proceedings, legal charges, and amounts that could never be paid off. The weight of this legal threat was overwhelming for someone like Claudia, who had always resolved her problems through conversation and mutual understanding. The thought of facing court, of having her name tarnished in the registry, of having her few assets seized was terrifying. But more than that, the prospect of spending the rest of her life paying off $1 million debt was something completely beyond her reach. She knew she didn't have the resources to hire a competent lawyer, and the prospect of having to defend herself against charges involving such a large sum of money left her panicked. How could she explain to a judge that she wasn't at fault for destroying such a valuable item? How could she convince a court that a domestic worker wouldn't have reason to hide the truth about such a massive accident? But what hurt most was the feeling of injustice. Claudia knew deep down that she hadn't done anything wrong. She had been careful, as she always was. The vase had broken, yes, but not because of her fault. The problem was that she couldn't explain how it had happened. And in the absence of a convincing explanation, the blame automatically fell on her, especially when it involved such an astronomical amount. The nights were the worst. Alone in her small apartment, Claudia mentally replayed every detail of that Tuesday. She remembered arriving early, following her usual routine, stopping for lunch on the balcony. She remembered Napoleon on the sideboard, his calm expression, how he was licking his paws when she found the shards. The difference now was that the shards represented much more than she had initially imagined. Each fragment she had collected was worth thousands of dollars. Each piece of Persian pottery was more valuable than anything she had ever owned. The true scale of the tragedy had only become clear when Donna Helena mentioned the price, $1 million. Could the cat have something to do with it? The idea had crossed Claudia's mind a few times, but she quickly dismissed it. How could a cat knock over a vase that was in the center of the shelf, far from the edge? And even if it were possible, how could she prove it? Who would believe a story like that, especially when it involved $1 million? Meanwhile, Donna Helena seemed to be conducting her own investigation. Claudia learned through neighborhood gossip that her employer had asked neighbors if they had heard any strange noises that Tuesday. Apparently, she was trying to find inconsistencies in Claudia's account, holes in the story that might prove the maid was lying about the circumstances of the destruction. This open distrust was like a poison spreading through the relationship they had built over the years. Claudia remembered how Donna Helena used to treat her, always kindly, asking about her family, remembering her birthday, giving her gifts on special occasions. Now this same person saw her as a liar, as someone capable of destroying $1 million treasure and then trying to hide the guilt. The situation grew even more tense when Donna Helena finally called her back for a final conversation. It was a rainy Friday, and Claudia headed home with a heavy heart, knowing that this conversation could seal her professional and personal fate in ways she had never imagined. Donna Helena welcomed her into the room where everything had happened. The antique bookcase stood there, imposing as ever, but with a glaring emptiness where the Persian vase once stood. It was as if that empty space were a silent accusation, a constant reminder of $1 million lost forever. The conversation was even more difficult than Claudia had imagined. Donna Helena was clearly devastated, but her devastation had turned to cold, calculated rage. She spoke of the 8 years of trust that had been broken along with the vase. She said she had always treated Claudia like family, that she had never suspected her, that she had always paid on time and even given her extra for holidays and Christmas. "Claudia," Donna Helena said, her voice thick with restrained emotion, "do you have any idea what that vase meant to me? It wasn't just the value of $1 million, although that alone is an impossible sum to ignore. It was a unique piece of history, a piece of Persian civilization that can never be recovered. And now, in return for all this kindness and trust, Claudia had broken the most precious piece in the house and was still trying to deny her responsibility. Donna Helena said she had consulted experts in Persian art and that the vase could only have broken if someone had bumped into the shelf or tried to move it. A piece that has survived 1,000 years of history, Donna Helena continued, that has been through wars, earthquakes, revolutions, and now it has shattered on an ordinary Tuesday. This doesn't happen by chance, Claudia. Objects like this don't break on their own. Claudia tried to defend herself once more, repeating her version of events, but her words rang hollow even to herself. How could she convince someone of her innocence when she couldn't even understand what had happened? How could she ask to be believed when the physical evidence represented $1 million loss? It was then that Donna Helena made the proposal Claudia dreaded most. She said she was willing to not take the case to criminal court, but that Claudia would have to assume responsibility for the damage. The value of the vase would be deducted from her future wages in a proposed installment plan that would last literally decades. It would be like a lifelong debt, a chain that would tie her to that house for the rest of her working life. "Considering your current salary," Donna Helena explained with calculated coldness, "it would take approximately 40 years to pay off this debt, assuming you never missed a day of work and that you agreed to have half your salary go toward paying it off. Alternatively, she could choose to quit her job immediately, but in that case, Helena reserved the right to seek her rights in court. And we all know how the system works when a simple person faces someone with resources in a dispute involving $1 million. Claudia's chances of emerging victorious in a legal battle were practically non-existent. It was an impossible choice. Accept blame for something she hadn't done and become a virtual slave for decades, or face a lawsuit that could destroy her financial life even more devastatingly. Claudia asked for time to think, but Donna Helena made it clear that she wanted an answer by the end of the weekend. As she walked home through the light rain that afternoon, Claudia felt as if she were carrying the world on her shoulders. 8 years of honest work, dedication and care for every detail of that house. All of it was being erased by an accident she couldn't even explain. And now, because of $1 million piece, her entire life was about to change forever. But there was something deeply troubling her about the whole situation, a feeling that some piece of the puzzle was missing. Claudia was an observant person, always paying attention to details, and something about this story didn't quite fit together. She clearly remembered Napoleon from that day. The cat had spent much of the morning pacing the living room, jumping from piece of furniture to piece of furniture with the agility typical of his species. Claudia had noticed him several times, but never paid him any attention. After all, it was normal to see the cat exploring the house. But what if Napoleon really had something to do with it? Claudia knew the idea sounded absurd, especially when it involved $1 million piece. But the more she thought about it, the more she felt there might be something there. Cats were unpredictable creatures, especially when they were playing or being curious. The problem was how to prove it. How could she demonstrate that a cat had caused $1 million accident when there were no witnesses? How could she convince Donna Helena that her theory wasn't just a last-ditch attempt to escape astronomical financial liability? It was while thinking about these possibilities that Claudia remembered a detail that had gone unnoticed until that moment. Donna Helena had installed security cameras around the house a few months earlier, after the neighborhood had suffered several burglaries. Claudia remembered seeing a discreet camera in the corner of the main living room, positioned to cover exactly the area where the antique bookcase stood. If the cameras had been working that Tuesday, everything would have been recorded. The truth about what really happened to the million-dollar vase would have been recorded. Indisputable. Definitive. Claudia felt a mixture of hope and anxiety welling up in her chest. Finally, there was a real chance of proving her innocence in such a serious situation. But how to approach Donna Helena with this suggestion? How to ask to see the recordings without seeming like she was stalling or making up new excuses to avoid a million-dollar responsibility? The situation was extremely delicate, and Claudia knew she had only one chance to get it right. Stay with me until the end of this story, because what's about to be revealed will completely change everything you thought about this case. The truth about what really happened to this million-dollar vase is much closer than you think, but we need to know where to look to find it. She knew she had until Monday to give Donna Helena an answer about a million-dollar debt, but her mind couldn't stop thinking about the security cameras. It was her only hope, her last resort before accepting blame that wasn't hers, or facing a lawsuit that could ruin her life forever. The scale of what was at stake was staggering. $1 million wasn't just an impossible sum to pay, it was more money than she would ever see in her entire life. It was the equivalent of 40 years of work, assuming she could keep her job and devote half her salary exclusively to paying off this debt. It was practically a life sentence of financial imprisonment. On Monday morning, Claudia arrived at Donna Helena's house with her heart pounding like a drum. She had mentally rehearsed dozens of times how she would approach the subject of the recordings, but she still felt nervous. One wrong word, one inappropriate tone, and she could forever lose the chance to prove her innocence in a matter involving a fortune. Donna Helena welcomed her into the same room where everything had happened, and Claudia noticed that she had rearranged some objects on the shelf, trying to disguise the void left by the Persian vase. But that space still screamed her absence, like a financial and emotional wound that refused to heal. It was impossible not to look at it and think, $1 million used to be in this place. "So, Claudia," said Donna Helena, her voice laden with a formality that hadn't existed between them before that episode, "I hope you've used these past few days to reflect on our conversation and the gravity of the situation. We're talking about $1 million and a unique historical piece. I need your decision today." Claudia took a deep breath, summoning all the courage she could muster. "Ms. Helena, I fully understand the gravity of the situation, and I know that the amount involved makes everything much more serious. But before we make any final decisions about such a large sum, I would like to make a suggestion." Donna Helena's gaze hardened slightly. "What kind of suggestion?" "Claudia, we hope we're talking about concrete proposals to resolve $1 million loss, not attempts at procrastination. Did you installed security cameras in the house a few months ago, didn't you? I saw one over there in the corner of the living room. If it was working on Tuesday when the vase broke, maybe we could see exactly what happened to this valuable piece." The silence that followed was deafening. Claudia could see the thoughts racing through Donna Helena's mind, who seemed to be considering the proposal with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. Had she really not thought of it before? Or had she considered it and dismissed it for some reason? When it comes to $1 million, any additional evidence should be considered. "Claudia," said Donna Helena finally, "are you trying to buy time with this camera business? Because if you are, know that it's only making your situation worse. $1 million is no joke." "No, Mrs. Helena. I just want the truth to come out about what really happened to this valuable piece. If I broke the vase, the cameras will show it, and I will face the $1 million consequences. But if I didn't break it, they will show it too. When it comes to such a large sum, don't you think it's worth checking before we make a decision that will affect our lives forever?" Claudia could see that her logic was irrefutable. If she were truly guilty of destroying $1 million piece, she wouldn't be suggesting they check the recordings. This suggestion alone was almost proof of her innocence, but she could also sense Donna Helena's resistance, as if the idea of checking the recordings bothered her for some reason. "Okay," said Mrs. Helena after a long pause, "let's watch those recordings. But I want to make it clear that if they confirm my suspicion that you were responsible for the destruction of $1 million vase, our conversation ends here, and you will have to bear the full financial consequences." Claudia agreed immediately, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. They would finally have the truth about what had happened to that vase-shaped fortune. But what if the recordings didn't show what she expected? What if there was some blind spot that didn't capture the exact moment? What if the system wasn't working on that particular day when $1 million was lost? Donna Helena led her to a small office on the second floor, where the monitoring equipment was located. It was a modern system, with several screens showing different angles of the house. Claudia had never seen that room before. It was obviously a private space that Donna Helena didn't allow her to enter during cleaning. "The system records everything automatically," explained Mrs. Helena as she fiddled with the controls, "and keeps the footage for a month before deleting it. Considering the amount involved, it's fortunate we still have the footage from that Tuesday. Let's see exactly what happened to my $1 million vase." The two stood before the main screen, and Claudia felt as if she were about to witness the trial of her own life. Donna Helena adjusted the date and time, returning to the morning of that fateful Tuesday. The black and white image showed the main room, with the antique bookcase clearly visible, including the space where the precious Persian vase occupied its prominent position. Claudia saw herself on screen, carrying out her cleaning routine with the same dedication as always. It was strange to see herself from that angle, like a character in a movie she didn't know she was starring in. In the footage, she appeared calm, focused, and extremely careful with every object she handled, especially when she approached the area where the $1 million vase stood. "Let's speed it up until lunchtime," Donna Helena said, and the images began to flash by. Claudia saw herself finishing cleaning the other rooms and heading to the kitchen. The main room was empty for a few minutes, with the Persian vase still intact in its prominent position, silently worth its $1 million. And then, like a ghost emerging from nowhere, Napoleon appeared on the screen. The Persian cat entered the room with that elegant walk typical of his breed, looked around as if assessing his territory, and then gracefully leaped onto the sideboard next to the bookcase where the fortune in antiques stood. Claudia felt her heart race. "Look, Mrs. Helena, Napoleon over there." "I see," replied Donna Helena, but her voice had a strange tone, as if she were seeing something she would rather not see, especially when it was such a valuable object. On the screen, the cat sat on the sideboard for a few minutes, watching out the window. Everything seemed normal, peaceful. The vase remained securely in its position, still worth its fortune intact. But then, something caught Napoleon's attention. Maybe it was a bird outside, maybe it was just his feline instincts kicking in. But he began to move more restlessly, clearly interested in something that had captured his attention. What happened next was so fast that they had to rewind the recording several times to fully understand the sequence of events that led to the $1 million destruction. Napoleon, in an impressive display of feline agility, leaped from the sideboard straight onto the antique shelf. It wasn't a calculated leap, but rather a sudden impulse, likely prompted by something he saw out the window. The cat landed squarely in the center of the bookcase, right next to the $1 million Persian vase. For a moment, it seemed like everything would be fine. Napoleon balanced himself for a few seconds, as cats do when landing on narrow surfaces. But the bookcase wasn't designed to support the weight and impact of a moving cat, especially in such close proximity to such a valuable piece. Claudia and Donna Helena watched in horror as the shelf swayed slightly under Napoleon's weight. The cat, sensing the instability, tried to jump to another spot, but his sudden movement was just what was needed to make the vase lose its balance. $1 million was about to shatter on the floor. In slow motion, they watched the precious Persian vase wobble, tilt, and finally topple from the shelf. The fall seemed to last an eternity, but lasted only seconds before the devastating impact with the marble floor. $1 million shattered before their eyes, instantly transforming from an ancient treasure into worthless wreckage. But there was more. After the vase shattered on the floor, the camera captured something no one had witnessed at that moment, something that would completely change the perspective on the events that cost $1 million. Claudia came running into the room, drawn by the sound of the shattering. And what she did next left both her and Donna Helena in complete shock. Napoleon had jumped off the bookshelf immediately after causing the $1 million accident and was calmly walking toward the exit of the room as if nothing had happened. Claudia, seeing the shards of the $1 million vase scattered across the floor, didn't stand there mourning the financial tragedy. Instead, she ran after the cat, worried that it might be injured by the fragments. In the footage, they could see Claudia picking up Napoleon, examining his paws to make sure he hadn't been cut by the shards of the $1 million vase, and then carrying him away from the wreckage. Only then did she return to assess the extent of the damage to the house's most valuable object. Donna Helena was completely speechless. Her expression changed from disbelief to shame. From shame to the kind of horror that comes with realizing we've committed a terrible injustice against someone who didn't deserve it, especially when it involves $1 million charge. Claudia, for her part, felt a complex mix of relief and sadness. Relief at finally having her innocence proven beyond doubt in such a serious matter, but sadness at realizing how much Donna Helena had doubted her, how willing she had been to destroy 8 years of trust based solely on suspicions about such a large sum. Donna Helena began to speak, but the words seemed to be stuck in her throat. "You saw it, didn't you?" Claudia said, her voice thick with emotion she'd been holding back for days. "I didn't break the $1 million vase. In fact, I wasn't even near the shelf when it happened. And even after the accident, my first concern was the Napoleon, not the value of the piece that had been lost." The irony of the situation was cruel and revealing. During all those days of accusations and suspicions surrounding $1 million, the real culprit was there, walking around the house with the calm of someone who had never been questioned about anything. And Claudia, the person who had tried to protect the cat from the shards of the house's most expensive vase, was the only one who suffered the consequences of the accident. Tell us in the comments, what do you think will happen next? How will Donna Helena react to this revelation about the $1 million destruction? And most importantly, is it possible to repair 8 years of trust that were broken along with that priceless Persian vase? The silence in the small office was so heavy that Claudia could hear her own heartbeat. Donna Helena stood before the screen, watching the images that had just completely changed the narrative of everything that had happened in the last few days. Her face had undergone a complete transformation, from arrogant certainty to shock, from shock to something that seemed to be a mixture of shame and despair as she realized she had wrongly accused someone of $1 million loss. "My God," Donna Helena murmured, finally breaking the silence. "Claudia, I don't know what to say. $1 million, and it wasn't your fault at all." Claudia remained silent for a moment, letting the weight of the truth settle between them. So many emotions were coursing through her chest that she didn't even know where to begin. 8 days of unfair accusations about an astronomical sum. 8 days of having her honesty questioned in a situation that could ruin her life forever. 8 days of feeling like a criminal because of $1 million she had never touched. "You know what to say, yes," Claudia replied, her voice firm but without anger. "You always knew. I worked in this house for 8 years, Mrs. Helena. 8 years caring for every detail as if it were my own, including that $1 million piece you loved so much. Did you really think I would break this treasure and then lie about it?" Donna Helena slowly turned to face Claudia. And for the first time since this whole situation began, her eyes were teary. "Claudia, I was so shocked, so desperate about losing the vase. When you lose $1 million at once, especially something so unique and irreplaceable, your mind doesn't work right. It was an inheritance from my husband, you know, but more than that, it was a piece of history that can never be recovered." "I know how much that piece meant to you," Claudia replied, and there was a deep sincerity in her voice. "That's why I've always been so careful with it. I knew I was dealing with something worth more than I would earn in several lifetimes. That's why it hurt so much when you doubted me on such a serious matter." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult either of them had ever faced. Donna Helena tried to explain her feelings, her emotional reaction, how the loss of such a valuable object had clouded her judgment. When you lose $1 million at once, especially something unique in the world, it's difficult to maintain rationality. But Claudia also needed to express her pain, her sense of betrayal, how much she had suffered being accused of something she hadn't done, especially when it involved such a large sum. "You know what hurt me the most?" Claudia said, her voice beginning to tremble slightly. It wasn't even the accusation itself, serious as it was when it involved $1 million. It was realizing that 8 years of honest work, 8 years of dedication, weren't enough for you to have any faith in me. One accident was enough for me to become a liar and a potential criminal in your eyes. This observation hit Donna Helena like a punch in the gut. She realized that amid her grief over the loss of the $1 million vase, she had committed an even greater injustice. She had broken something far more valuable than any material object, even one worth $1 million. She had broken the trust of a person who had spent nearly a decade caring for her home and her life with absolute dedication. "Claudia, I'm sorry," Donna Helena said, tears streaming freely down her face. "I know my words can't undo the harm I've caused, especially in such a serious situation involving so much money. But I need you to know that I'm deeply sorry. You didn't deserve to go through this, especially because of something you didn't even do. But there was something else that needed to be said, something that made the whole situation even more touching and revealed the true character of the people involved." Donna Helena turned her attention to the screen, where the recording still showed the moments after the $1 million accident. There was Claudia, even shocked by the destruction of the $1 million vase, rushing to check on Napoleon, carefully picking up the cat, examining its paws to make sure it hadn't been hurt. "Look at this, Claudia," said Donna Helena, pointing to the canvas. "Even after seeing my $1 million piece destroyed, your first reaction was to protect Napoleon. You could have been angry with him, you could have thrown him out of the room, but you didn't. You were concerned about making sure he was safe, even though you knew he had caused astronomical damage." Claudia looked at the screen and found herself in that moment of pure instinct. "Napoleon wasn't to blame, Ms. Helena. He's a cat. He was just following his instincts. And besides, I didn't want him to cut himself on the shards. The tragedy of $1 million destroyed was enough. We didn't need another victim." This response revealed something fundamental about Claudia's character that Donna Helena had forgotten amid her grief and anger over the financial loss. This was the same person who, for 8 years, had shown care and dedication not only to the household items, but to every living thing that lived there. She was the same person who always asked about the health of her family, who remembered important dates, who even treated the family cat with genuine affection, even when it had caused $1 million loss. "Napoleon," said Mrs. Helena, looking out the office window where the cat was sleeping peacefully in a sunny corner of the garden. "All this time, I thought you were the villain in the $1 million story, when in fact you were the one protecting the real cause of the accident." The irony of the situation was almost poetic. Napoleon, the elegant and haughty cat who always seemed above suspicion, had been responsible for the destruction of $1 million. But Claudia, the person who suffered most from the financial and emotional consequences, was also the only one who cared about his well-being after the tragedy. Donna Helena went to a drawer in her office and pulled out some papers she had prepared over the past few days. They were documents related to the lawsuit she was considering against Claudia, quotes for trying to replace the toilet, although it was impossible, consultations with lawyers specializing in high-value cases. All of it now seemed obscene in light of the truth revealed by the cameras. I had prepared myself for a legal battle involving $1 million, Donna Helena confessed, tearing up the papers in front of Claudia. I was ready to sue you, to collect every penny of that astronomical amount. I had consulted lawyers, experts, insurance specialists. How could I have been so blind? Claudia watched the papers being destroyed with a mixture of relief and melancholy. Grief can make people act in ways they never imagined, she said. And when it's a sum like $1 million, I understand that you were desperate, but that doesn't make what I went through any less painful. It was important for Donna Helena to fully understand the impact of her actions. For more than a week, Claudia had lived under the shadow of an unjust accusation involving $1 million. She had lost her sleep, her peace of mind, and the trust of her neighbors. She had faced the real possibility of losing her job, of being sued for an amount she could never pay, of having her reputation destroyed in the community where she had lived for years. I want to make it up to you somehow, said Donna Helena. I know I can't undo what happened, but I need to try to repair at least some of the damage I caused. And I know this goes beyond financial value. We're talking about trust, dignity, and 8 years of relationship that were nearly destroyed. Claudia looked at her with an expression that mixed gratitude and sadness. What I want most, Mrs. Helena, is not money or material compensation. What I want is for our relationship to be based on trust again, but I don't know if that's possible after everything that's happened, especially in such a serious situation. This was perhaps the most tragic consequence of the entire situation. The Persian vase might have been irreplaceable and worth $1 million, but the broken trust between two people who had built a relationship of mutual respect over 8 years was even more difficult to repair. When you accuse someone of a crime involving that much money, some wounds take a long time to heal. Donna Helena approached Claudia and, for the first time since the crisis began, touched her affectionately, placing her hand on her shoulder. Claudia, I want to try to rebuild our relationship. I know it won't be easy. I know I'll need to regain your trust after such a serious accusation. But if you give me a chance, I'll do everything in my power to make amends for the harm I've caused. The moment was charged with emotion. Here were two women who had spent years sharing the same space, building a joint routine, fostering an environment of harmony and respect. And all of that had been shattered by an accident caused by a mischievous cat and an exaggerated emotional reaction to the loss of $1 million. Claudia thought for a long moment before answering. She could sense the sincerity in Donna Helena's request, but she also knew that some wounds take time to fully heal, especially when they involve such serious accusations. I accept your apology, Mrs. Helena, he said finally. And I want to keep working here because I love this house. I love taking care of it and all its treasures. But it will take time for everything to get back to the way it was. Trust needs to be rebuilt little by little, day by day, especially after such a serious situation. Donna Helena agreed, understanding that there was a long road ahead. But there was something else she felt the need to do, a way to publicly demonstrate that Claudia had been wronged in such a serious matter. I want everyone to know the truth, said Donna Helena. All the neighbors who learned of the accusations also need to know that you have been completely exonerated. I will not allow your reputation to continue to be tarnished because of my mistake, especially in a matter as serious as this. And that's how the true revelation of this story came to light, not just for Claudia and Donna Helena, but for the entire community that had witnessed the unfolding of this $1 million drama. The security camera footage not only proved Claudia's innocence, but revealed something even deeper about character, trust, and how we judge people in times of crisis, especially when so much money is at stake. 3 months have passed since that revealing day in Donna Helena's office. 3 months that transformed not only the relationship between Claudia and her boss, but also profoundly changed both their perspectives on trust, judgment, and forgiveness. 3 months of carefully rebuilding a relationship that had been shaken to its foundations by a $1 million accusation. The first thing Donna Helena did after discovering the truth was fulfill her promise to clear Claudia's name in the community. She personally spoke to every neighbor who had heard about the accusations, explained what had really happened to the $1 million vase, and apologized for the misunderstanding she had caused. It was no easy task for a proud person like her, but she felt it was her moral obligation to repair the damage she had caused to Claudia's reputation in such a serious matter. The process of retelling the true story to each neighbor was humiliating for Donna Helena, but also liberating. She had to swallow her pride and admit she had made a serious error of judgment in a situation involving so much money. She had to explain about the security cameras, about Napoleon knocking over the $1 million vase, about how Claudia had actually tried to protect the cat from the shards of the house's most valuable piece. Each conversation was unique and revealing. Donna Carmen, the closest neighbor, listened to everything with teary eyes and then hugged Donna Helena, saying that everyone makes mistakes when they're emotional, especially when it involves such a great loss. $1 million, she murmured. Anyone would be desperate with a loss like that. Mr. João, the retired neighbor who always greeted Claudia on the street, just shook his head and said, "I knew that girl wouldn't do something like that. Not even for $1 million. She was always too honest for that." But there were also harsher reactions. Donna Mercedes, who lived 3 houses away, said coldly, "Helena, you almost destroyed an innocent person's life because of money. $1 million is a lot, but a person's dignity is worth more than that. That's not something you easily forget." His words were like a slap in the face, but Donna Helena knew she deserved every single one. She had learned the hard way that no amount of money, not even $1 million, justifies destroying an innocent person's life. The impact of this revelation on the neighborhood was immense. People who had viewed Claudia with suspicion in recent months, especially after learning about the amount of money involved, now greeted her on the street with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. Some even confessed that they had always had doubts about the accusations, but hadn't had the courage to publicly express their opinions on such a serious matter. Claudia observed these changes with mixed feelings. On the one hand, she felt relief at having her reputation restored in such a serious situation. On the other, it pained her to realize how quickly people had changed their opinion of her. If they could doubt her so easily based on rumors about $1 million, it meant her image in the community was more fragile than she realized. The first time Claudia returned to the neighborhood grocery store after the truth was revealed was an intense experience. Donna Rosa, the owner, came running to her with tears in her eyes. "Claudia, my daughter, what a terrible injustice you've suffered. And on top of that, involving so much money. I always knew you were incapable of doing such a thing, even if it was for $1 million. But Claudia clearly remembered how Donna Rosa's behavior had changed during the period of the accusations. Greetings had become colder, smiles more forced, especially after learning of the astronomical amount involved. Now faced with the revealed truth, everyone seemed to have conveniently forgotten their moments of doubt. "Donna Rosa," Claudia replied politely, "thank you for your words. It was a very difficult time for me, especially when it comes to such a serious accusation. I can imagine, my daughter, $1 million, but now it's all cleared up, isn't it? You must be relieved." Claudia agreed, but inside she reflected on how easily people forget the times they failed to support someone in need. It was a painful lesson in human nature, but also an important one about who truly deserves our trust when things get tough and big money is at stake. At Donna Helena's house, the atmosphere had also completely changed. Her employer made a point of treating Claudia with a respect and kindness that bordered on exaggeration, as if she were trying to compensate for every moment of distrust with 2 moments of kindness. Claudia knew it was her way of coping with the guilt of having wrongly accused someone of a crime involving so much money, but sometimes she felt uncomfortable with such care. There were times when Donna Helena seemed to be walking on eggshells around Claudia, measuring every word, every gesture, afraid to say or do anything that could be interpreted as distrust. It was touching to see the effort she was making, but it also created an artificial tension that both of them felt. "Donna Helena," Claudia said one afternoon, "you don't need to be so careful with me. I understand that you're trying to make up for what happened, but I prefer our relationship to be natural, like it was before all this mess with the millionaire vase." Donna Helena stopped what she was doing and looked at Claudia with an expression of gratitude and relief. "Claudia, thank you for saying that. I really didn't know how to act after such a serious situation. I'm so afraid of making another mistake, of hurting you again." "You're going to make mistakes," Claudia replied with a sad smile, "and I'm going to make mistakes too. We're human beings. The important thing is that we now know we can talk about these mistakes instead of jumping straight to accusations, especially in such a serious situation." Napoleon, the true cause of all that million-dollar mess, continued his feline life, unaware that he had been the protagonist of such an intense human drama involving so much money. Donna Helena had taken some precautions to prevent further accidents, rearranging some more fragile objects and placing them in places less accessible to the cat. But she couldn't stay mad at him. After all, he had acted purely on instinct, unaware that he was destroying a fortune. Donna Helena's behavior toward Napoleon became almost comical. She constantly watched him whenever he approached delicate objects, as if expecting him to cause another million-dollar disaster at any moment. The cat, for his part, seemed oblivious to all the extra attention he was receiving. "You know," Donna Helena said to Claudia one afternoon as they watched Napoleon sleeping peacefully on the porch, "I don't think he even realizes he caused $1 million worth of destruction. For him, it was just another normal day, exploring the house as he always did." Claudia smiled, one of the first genuine smiles she'd given in that house since the incident. "Cats live in the present," she replied. "They don't carry past guilt or worry about future consequences, even when they cost $1 million. Maybe we have something to learn from them." Claudia's observation deeply touched Helena. She realized that, throughout that period of crisis, she had been carried away by emotions from the past. The loss of her husband, the sentimental importance of the vase, its astronomical financial value, and fears about the future, the possibility of having been deceived, the need for protection against future betrayals. In the process, she had lost sight of the present and the real person before her. "Claudia," said Donna Helena in a conversation that lasted all afternoon, "I realized that my reaction to that accident had much more to do with me than with you. I was dealing with old fears, with traumas from past losses. When I saw that $1 million vase broken, I didn't just see a destroyed object. I saw all the losses I had ever suffered in my life." Claudia listened patiently as Donna Helena spoke about her husband's death, about how vulnerable and unprotected she had felt after losing her lifelong companion. The vase represented not only a reminder of him and an astronomical sum of money, but also a sense of security that at least a few precious things could remain intact in a world where everything seemed fragile and temporary. "When I found the broken vase," Donna Helena continued, "it was as if all those losses came rushing back. And when I learned it was worth $1 million, I could never get back. The despair was even greater. I needed someone to blame, someone to hold responsible for this additional pain. You were there, so you became the target of my anger." This revelation helped Claudia better understand the intensity of Donna Helena's reaction. It didn't justify the injustice she had suffered, but it explained how a normally rational person could have acted so irrationally, especially when so much money was involved. "I understand, Mrs. Helena," Claudia replied. "Grief can make people act in ways they never imagined, especially when so much money is involved, but that doesn't make what I went through any less painful. There are times when I still feel angry, still betrayed by the way you doubted me on such a serious matter." Claudia's honesty was crucial to their healing process. She wasn't pretending everything was fine just to keep the peace. She was acknowledging her wounds while also demonstrating a willingness to work on healing them, even after such a serious accusation. Their relationship was slowly rebuilding, but there were still occasional moments of tension. Once, Claudia was cleaning the refurbished bookshelf when she knocked over a small porcelain figurine. For a second, time seemed to stand still. They both stared at the intact piece on the floor, then looked at each other with expressions that mixed fear and relief. "It didn't break," Claudia said, picking up the figurine carefully, but her hands were shaking slightly. "It didn't break," repeated Donna Helena. "And even if it had, it's not worth nearly $1 million. They both laughed nervously, aware of how that minor accident had stirred memories of their recent trauma. Their hearts had raced for a few seconds, reminding them that they still bore the scars of that difficult time. But the fact that they could laugh together about it and even make a joke about the cost showed they were moving in the right direction. These moments were important for both of their healing processes. They showed that there were still sensitive wounds, but also that it was possible to overcome them with patience and mutual understanding. Each small incident they managed to resolve together strengthened their trust a little more. Donna Helena had made a decision that surprised Claudia. She decided to replace the home's security camera system, installing even more modern equipment with better image quality. But more importantly, she made a point of showing Claudia where all the cameras were installed and how they worked. "I don't want you to feel like you're being watched," Helena explained as she showed Claudia each camera. "But if there's ever any misunderstanding, any confusing situation, especially involving valuable objects, we'll know exactly where to find the truth. We'll never again allow assumptions and suspicions to destroy our relationship." Claudia understood the gesture. It wasn't distrust, but rather a guarantee of complete transparency between them. It was Donna Helena's way of demonstrating that she had learned her lesson and would never allow unfounded suspicions to harm their relationship again, especially in a financial matter. "Actually," Claudia said, "I think these cameras can protect us both. They protect you from having things damaged without knowing how, and they protect me from being wrongly accused of accidents I didn't cause, especially when so much money is involved." The installation of the new cameras became almost a ritual of renewing trust between them. Donna Helena insisted that Claudia be present throughout the entire process, explaining how to access the recordings if necessary, and even giving her a copy of the system passwords. "I want you to know that there are no secrets between us," said Donna Helena. "You have access to the same information as I do. We are partners in this house, not adversaries, especially after everything we've been through." Over time, Claudia also went through her own growth process. She realized that during all those years of work, she had developed a relationship almost of emotional dependence on Donna Helena's approval. The period of crisis had forced her to find strength within herself, to value her own integrity regardless of the recognition of others, even when accused of something so serious. During the difficult nights of that period of accusations, Claudia had discovered reserves of inner strength she hadn't even known she possessed. She had learned to sleep peacefully knowing she was telling the truth, even when no one believed her in a matter involving so much money. She had discovered that her self-esteem didn't need to depend on the opinions of others, no matter how important those people were in her life. "You know, Mrs. Helena," Claudia said in a frank conversation they had months later. As painful as that period was, especially being accused of something so serious, I think it taught me something important about myself. I learned that I can maintain my dignity even when people doubt me in serious situations. I learned that my integrity does not depend on the recognition of others. Donna Helena nodded, understanding that Claudia had emerged from that experience not only exonerated, but also stronger. And I learned that an emotional reaction should never make me forget what I know about a person's character, she replied. 8 years of living together are worth more than any momentary suspicion, even in a situation involving so much money. I learned that I should trust what I know about people, not what I fear they might be. The story spread beyond the immediate neighborhood. Other domestic workers in the area learned of the case and began seeking out Claudia to talk. Many had experienced similar situations: unfair accusations, distrust from employers, prejudices based on social class, especially when money was involved. Claudia unwittingly became a symbol of resilience and dignity for this community of workers. Rosa, a maid who worked a few streets away, was one of the first to seek out Claudia. She had experienced a similar situation a few years earlier when she was accused of stealing a piece of jewelry that was later found elsewhere in the house. "What impresses me most about your story," Rosa said, "is that you never lost your manners, never responded with anger, even though you were wronged in such a serious matter involving so much money. That shows who you really are." Claudia reflected on this observation. It was true that she had maintained her composure throughout the difficult period, but it hadn't been easy. There were times when she wanted to scream, times when she wanted to give up, times when anger nearly consumed her. But something inside her knew that reacting aggressively would only worsen her situation, especially with such a serious accusation. "I think I kept my cool because I knew the truth would eventually come out," she explained to Rosa. "And also because losing control wouldn't help me in such a serious situation. It would only confirm the prejudices some people already had about me." These conversations with other domestic workers were eye-opening for Claudia. She realized that her experience wasn't unique, that many women in her profession faced daily situations of distrust and prejudice, especially when money was involved. Some told stories of employers installing hidden cameras to monitor their movements. Others spoke of accusations based purely on unfounded suspicions. Anna, a maid who worked at a high-end home on the other side of town, said she was accused of stealing money from a drawer. "They even searched my purse," she said indignantly, "as if I were a common thief, without even investigating properly." These stories made Claudia realize that despite the pain she had endured, she had still been lucky. At least Donna Helena had been honest enough to admit her mistake when the truth came out, even in such a dire situation. Many other employees were not so lucky, continuing to work in environments where they were constantly suspected and monitored. Claudia's wisdom caught the attention of others in the community. She began to be sought out by maids who were going through difficult situations with their employers. Not that she considered herself a counselor, but her experience had given her a unique perspective on how to handle conflicts and misunderstandings in the domestic work environment, especially when high values are involved. "The first thing I always tell the women who approached her," Claudia explained, "is to document everything, especially when it comes to valuable objects. Write down important conversations, save receipts, keep records. If you're ever accused of something, you'll have a way to defend yourself." But more important than practical strategies, Claudia always emphasized the importance of maintaining dignity. "No matter how they treat you," she said, "even in a serious situation involving money, you know who you are. Don't let others' distrust shake your self-confidence." Donna Helena also underwent profound transformations. The experience made her question many of her unconscious biases and automatic reactions to crisis situations. She began treating not only Claudia, but all the service providers who worked in her home with greater respect and consideration. The gardener, who had always been treated with warmth but aloofness, noticed the change. "Donna Helena is different," he commented to Claudia. "More attentive, more interested in how I am. She asks about my family, offers me water without me asking." "So, she learned something important," Claudia replied. "She learned that everyone deserves respect and consideration, regardless of their role, and that we shouldn't jump to conclusions about anyone. I realized that all these years, even though I treated you well, I still maintained a certain distance based on social differences," Donna Helena confessed to Claudia in a heartfelt conversation. "As if your word automatically held less value than mine in a serious situation. As if you were inherently less trustworthy simply because of your social position. This is something I need to change in myself." This self-criticism from Helena was crucial to the complete healing of their relationship. Claudia saw that her boss was not only apologizing for the specific incident, but also acknowledging deeper patterns of behavior that had contributed to the crisis. "Donna Helena," Claudia replied, "I think many people in your social position act this way without even realizing it, especially when money is involved. It's not necessarily evil, but it's a prejudice that's so ingrained in our society that it seems natural. The important thing is that you've recognized this and are working to change it." The conversation lasted for hours, touching on topics they had never discussed before. They discussed class differences, social prejudices, and how economic inequality can affect relationships, especially in situations involving significant amounts of money. It was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one so they could build a more honest and equitable relationship. Donna Helena also decided to make practical changes to her approach to employees. She established monthly meetings to listen to suggestions and complaints, created a small emergency fund to help employees in financial difficulties, and began giving extra time off whenever possible. "I'm not doing this out of guilt," she explained to Claudia. "I'm doing it because I realized it was the right thing to do from the start. The experience we went through opened my eyes to a lot of things, especially how money can distort our perceptions of people." 6 months after the incident, Donna Helena made a decision that surprised not only Claudia, but the entire neighborhood. She organized a small party at her home, inviting all the neighbors who had learned of the accusations against Claudia. The goal was to publicly celebrate the friendship and trust that had been restored between them. "I want everyone to see that Claudia is not just my maid," Donna Helena announced during the party. "She is someone I deeply care about, someone I trust completely and who has my respect and admiration, someone who was unjustly accused in a very serious situation and who behaved with a dignity that many of us would not have." Claudia was touched by the gesture, but also a little embarrassed by so much attention. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially at an upper-middle-class social event. But she realized the symbolic importance of that moment for Donna Helena and the entire community. During the party, several people approached Claudia to talk, not about the incident, but about other matters. She realized she was being seen differently by her neighbors, not just as Donna Helena's maid, but as a person with her own story and personality, someone who had faced a difficult situation with dignity. Donna Mercedes, who had been one of Donna Helena's most vocal critics during the crisis, approached Claudia at the end of the party. "Claudia," she said, "I wanted to tell you that I always admired your dignity during that difficult time. You behaved better than many people in your situation would, especially in the face of such a serious accusation." "Thank you, Mrs. Mercedes," Claudia replied. "It was a difficult time, but I think we all learned something from it." "We certainly learned," Ms. Mercedes agreed, especially about not jumping to conclusions and the importance of supporting people in difficult times, even when a lot of money is involved. Today, when I look back on this whole story, I'm impressed by the human capacity to grow through adversity. Claudia and Donna Helena could have allowed that million-dollar incident to completely destroy their relationship. Instead, they used the crisis as an opportunity to get to know each other better and build something even stronger. The Persian vase was never replaced, nor could it be. It was unique in the world. Donna Helena decided to leave that empty space on the shelf as a permanent reminder of the lessons she learned. It's not a reminder of the loss of $1 million, she explained, but rather a reminder that people are more important than things, even the most valuable ones, and that we should always give people the benefit of the doubt, especially those who have proven their character over the years. Napoleon, ironically, seems to have developed a special relationship with that empty space. Donna Helena often finds him sitting in front of the bookshelf, staring at the spot where the $1 million vase used to be. Sometimes I think he knows he caused $1 million loss, she comments to Claudia, as if he's reflecting on his actions. Claudia laughs at Donna Helena's remarks. I think you're giving him too much credit, she says. Cats don't feel guilt like humans, even when they cause millions in losses. He's probably just curious why that space is empty. But they both agree that there's something poetic about the way Napoleon seems to be watching over the space he created with his $1 million feline antics. Claudia continues to work in the same house to this day. Their relationship hasn't returned to exactly what it was before. It would be impossible to completely erase the memories of that difficult period involving such a serious accusation. But in a way, it has become even stronger, based on a deeper and more mature understanding of each other's flaws and strengths. Our relationship is more honest now, Claudia observes. Before, there were things we never talked about, topics we avoided, especially money and trust. Now we talk about everything: social differences, prejudices, fears, expectations. It's more difficult in some ways, but it's also more real. Donna Helena completely agrees. Before, I idealized our relationship, she admits. I thought being polite and paying on time was enough for everything to be perfect. Now I know that true relationships require more work, more honesty, more vulnerability, especially after such a serious crisis. The truth is, this story made me reflect a lot on how we judge people, especially in times of financial crisis. How often do we allow our emotions to cloud our judgment when a lot of money is involved? How often do we doubt people who have always given us reason to trust them just because we're desperate to find someone to blame for a huge loss? And how often is the truth right in front of us, but we don't know where to look? I also think about how we react when we discover we've committed a grave injustice against someone. Some people retreat into defensiveness, trying to justify their mistakes, even in a serious situation. Others sink into a paralyzing guilt that helps no one. Donna Helena chose a third path. She publicly acknowledged her mistake, genuinely apologized, and actively worked to repair the damage done. Claudia also teaches us a lot about how to deal with grave injustices. She could have become bitter, vengeful, or lost faith in human kindness after being accused of something so serious. Instead, she maintained her dignity, fought patiently for the truth, and when justice finally prevailed, demonstrated a capacity for forgiveness without forgetting the lessons learned. The most beautiful thing about all this is seeing how two people managed to turn a $1 million crisis into an opportunity for growth. Claudia discovered her own inner strength, her ability to maintain dignity even under extreme pressure. Donna Helena learned about her own prejudices and the importance of giving people the benefit of the doubt, especially those who have already proven their character over the years. This story also reminds us of the importance of technology in the search for truth. The security cameras that Donna Helena had installed to protect against thieves ended up being crucial in revealing the truth about an internal conflict involving so much money. In our digital age, it's comforting to know that sometimes technology can be our ally in the fight against injustices, even the most costly ones. But perhaps the most important lesson from this story is about the nature of trust when money is involved. True trust isn't blind. It's built over time through consistent actions and demonstrated character. When that trust is broken by misunderstandings or emotional reactions, especially in a dire financial situation, it can be rebuilt, but it requires honest work from both parties. Claudia and Helena's experience shows us that it's possible to overcome crises of trust even when there's a lot of money at stake, when there's a genuine willingness for personal growth and mutual understanding. It's not easy, it's not quick, and it leaves scars, but it is possible. And most importantly, it teaches us that no amount of money, not even $1 million, is worth more than dignity and trust between people. That before we accuse someone of something serious, especially when large sums of money are involved, we should stop, breathe, and remember what we know about that person's character. What do you think of this story? Have you ever been unfairly accused of something you didn't do, especially a serious matter? How did you handle the pressure of mistrust when the stakes were high? Or perhaps you were the one who made hasty accusations that you later discovered were unfounded. How did you feel when you discovered the truth? Were you able to apologize and work to repair the damage done? Leave your opinion in the comments. I love reading your experiences and reflections on the stories I share here. Your own experiences greatly enrich our conversation and help others who may be going through similar situations, especially when serious financial issues are involved. And if this story touched you in any way, if it made you reflect on trust, prejudice, or forgiveness, especially in situations involving money, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future stories. Every story I tell here is an opportunity to learn about the complexity of human nature. There's an incredible story waiting for you in the next video. A story that will also make you question everything you think you know about justice and truth, about how appearances can be deceiving, and about how reality is sometimes very different from what we imagine. A story that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on situations in which money can distort our perceptions of people. Click here and join me for another moving journey that will touch your heart. Thank you for sticking around until the end of this story about Claudia, Donna Helena, and the $1 million Persian vase. Your attention and time are precious to me, and I hope this narrative was worth every minute you invested. Until next time, and remember, the truth isn't always obvious, especially when there's a lot of money at stake, but it's always worth seeking.